called lunch. The girl I trade jokes with at the cafeteria I eat out on Mondays has a new one for me this time. Her son is going to live with his grandmother for a while. I ask her why. We're laughing in our way, her filling tea glasses, me sliding 2 pieces of pie onto 1 saucer, like they let me do. And she says she's sending him to her mother's because this morning, when she went in to wake him for school, his breath was white, because she doesn't have a heater in her house. But her mother does. One of those big ones that shoots heat up through the vent in the living room. And then she nods for me to take my pie, that it's okay. At one point, a few minutes later, eating whatever I'm eating, I see a guy about 25 stand up from his table and pull his dad. I think it's his dad anyway, but it could be a boss, I guess. But what the guy does is pull him up from his plate and arrange him into the very specific shape he needs him to be in to properly show this complicated karate move he saw in a show last night, or just thought of, maybe. Either way, his face when he slow motions through the move is deadly serious, and he does the sound effects too, or holds his lips like he's making the sounds. And I look away, want to fall in love with something, the first thing I see, but close my eyes instead, know that next week and the week after, I'll be eating in a different place. When I sat down to write this piece, it was actually right after I had eaten at this. You don't have furs here. You don't have furs here, do you? First cafeteria, you do. We don't have furs in Colorado either. It's really it's like a wasteland in Colorado. I wrote it right after I was pulling away from furs, and those people who ride around on bikes with the ties and they knock on your door and tell you stuff. There was 2 of them dudes across the road from me, driving by a strip mall in Lubbock, Texas, and the one in front was just pedaling along doing his thing, but the one in back was trying so hard the whole way they drove past me to do a wheelie. That made me so happy that I sat down to write this story, and then I didn't even write about him. I couldn't figure out how to get him into the story. But so many stories I write, they're just like what happened. I don't even change the name. Sometimes I don't give a name. So many of the stories that I publish can be called nonfiction, I guess, but I don't write nonfiction, so I call them fiction. Also, at this exact same intersection where that first comes out in Lubbock, I got in a wreck there once, I remember. Yeah, and it was in my wife's Cherokee, and I got hit from the back pretty hard, and this girl jumps out of her car who had hit me, and it was a weird thing because she just kept running all around. She was like, quite nervous and distraught, but all she kept saying was that her bra had broken when she hit me. It was a weird. I didn't know what to do. I don't know how to console her. And I already knew I was walking home because the truck was going to get towed. And back then we had baby seats because our kids were young, and I was going to be walking home with a baby seat over my shoulder. Like in the Old West, you always see the cowboys with a saddle over their shoulder. I'd be doing it with a baby seat. Let me see. I'm going to try to keep watching the clock here. All right. I'll read you another piece from here. I think it's on page 11. Yep, page 11. Cool. It's called The Talk. It was late in the summer after the boy next door had hit a baseball through his own bedroom window. 10 o'clock maybe, the stars all out. A Friday. Dan was testing out his new hot tub for the 2nd night in a row. Because she didn't have school tomorrow, his daughter Shani was testing it with him. They were in opposite corners. Shani wearing the one piece for his sake, he knew. He wasn't giving her any sips of his beer, though. Her hair was pinned up so it wouldn't turn green like her mother's. Dan was still trying to get the chemicals balanced. In 5 years, it would be a joke. Right now, though, his wife Sherry was parked in the living room, not talking to him. He had to concentrate to keep from smiling about it. He leaned his head back, stared straight up, Shani talking all the while, updating him on the complicated politics of, he was pretty sure, cheerleading tryouts. How this year, the new coordinator was having all the girls try out again. Nobody was carrying over like it had always been. It was the first part of her case for new somethings Dan knew. Shoes, boots, piercings. It might even be leading up to the Sunfire for sale down the street, the one she'd been trying to bring up for days already. Meanwhile, the water coursed around them, hot and perfect. And it didn't smell so much like chlorine now, and with this to come home to every night, the days were going to be easier to get through, he knew. Dad? Dan cranked his head back to Shani. I was just telling you about how James was saying you can't get pregnant that way. Dan shook his head. It was her new trick, making him uncomfortable. You were talking about Miss Glennis, he said, the new coordinator. She thinks she has to change everything. Dan shrugged, tipped his beer up, and held it there long enough that maybe Shaney would think he was agreeing, that he had some stake in the new and controversial policies of Miss Glennis. You know you'll make it, he said. Come on, get serious. That's what I'm saying. Just because I was on last year, you'll make it because you're you, Dan said. Then they were interrupted by a sound next door. The boy with the broken window's light was on. Late, Dan said, staring. He's fine, Dad, Shaney said. Dan focused on the window, unsure how the kid, being 5, was any kind of answer. For a moment, he wondered how many beers he had, but then knew it couldn't be more than 6 anyway. And then it started. The couple next door had crept into the son's room to make use of his bunk bed. The lower level, it sounded like, probably so one of them could hang from the top rails, something like that. The kid asleep on the couch, bathed in cartoon light. Dan knew it was a bunk bed because they called him over to look at the window, like he knew anything about windows. Shaney tried to swallow her laugh, but it came out her nose anyway. The reason they could hear the couple so well was a baseball-sized hole in the glass. Duct tape kept the rain and the spiders out, but couldn't keep the wife's voice in. What she was saying, too, Dan had to try not to smile. And then it went on and on and on, the bed scraping and rattling, and all Dan could do really was stare at the surface of the water and not let his feet touch Shaney's. After 6 minutes of it, maybe, a crescendo of strained breathing seeping out a broken window, the lights came on, and then the bathroom light. Dan shook his head, kept his eyes narrow, pushed his lower lip out with his tongue. When he looked up to Shaney, she collapsed into laughter. Dan tipped his bottle up again, even though it had been empty now for 5 minutes. Maybe I should fix that for him, he said. The window or the bed, Shaney said, smiling far too hard. And then she stood up from the water, and Dan looked away like he always did, and drank from his empty bottle again. Wrapped in her towel, Shaney handed him another from the cooler. He nodded thanks, tipped his head next door. I don't want to hear you on the phone about that, he said. Shaney looked over for the briefest instant, pulled her top lip into her mouth, and told him in all seriousness, you won't. Then skipped inside to whatever 15-year-old girls do at home at 10:30 on a Friday night. And after that, Dan knew better than to ever ask her any question he didn't already know the answer to. Oh, I've got one right beside it, a little short one. They're all a little shorter than this one, but this is a bow hunting story. A lot of people bow hunt down this part of the country, I know. Yeah, I got time. Neither heads nor tails. My father lost his left nipple in a hunting-related accident. He said it didn't make him any less of a father. It made him more of a man, really. What happened was it was still hot 2 weeks before bow season opened, and he was in the garage in his undershirt, limbering up his favorite bow. After a couple of half draws to get the limbs warm, he pulled the string back all the way, no arrow, and held it for a steady 10 count. On 11, though, his shaky fingers let the bowstring slip. It sliced forward like razor wire. His nipple spun through the air. He slapped the wall of the garage and stuck. The way he tells it, he kind of grunted a smile then. The nerves in his new cavity were still too shocked to relay anything up to his head. He walked directly inside, cupping his hand over his chest to keep the air out. By the time he got a towel and made it back to the garage, which he'd had open, Telly, our golden retriever, was sitting there. My father could see that what Telly was trying to do is what he always did when he was guilty, gulping down his smile. There was still a wet smear on the wall where he licked the nipple off. It didn't make him any less of a dog, my father says. Really, it made him more of a dog, probably. And it's not like they could have sewn it back on anyway, right? And risk getting it back on, but rotate it half around now like a dial? No, but anyway, my father and his nipple stump. Does it make me any less of a son for staring at it when we're at the beach? Oh, that, my mom says, when she sees the fascination in my face, and then tells my father to be sure and get the sunblock down into that deer. That's the kind of place that cancer will just pool. Because it's easier to play along, my father dollops the sunblock in, around, and after it's slicked in, we're all just lying there in the sun waiting to get dry enough for the drive home. I'll sometimes cue into my father's right hand, slapped across his chest like there's a flag in the area. But there's not. And he's asleep anyway. His right finger just skating around the oily rim of his caldera of scar tissue, that divot in his life. What it does, and this is the part I mostly hate, is make me sneak touches up onto my own chest. Sneak touches and maybe even a light pinch just to be sure. At least until my mom slaps the back of my hand and hisses "not in public" to me. It doesn't make me any less of a man, I don't think, but it doesn't help either. I'll read one last piece from this. Yeah, I think I got time. One last piece from this.
Was that fiction or nonfiction?
That was fiction. But it's from one summer, about 3 summers ago, maybe 4 summers ago. I built my own bow, which took forever. Like, if I didn't know it was going to take that long, I just bought a bow. But it took me forever, and I finally got it built, and I was in the backyard shooting it, and it's summer, for a shirt on. And it started scraping across my chest, and I thought, I got to go inside and write a story. This is called Dedication. This is to Tammy Carlton, who sat 2 seats up and 1 over in 4th grade and said once, "Why don't you just write a book about it?" This during my explanation to the teacher about the gum and monkey bars thing. This is to Miss Glennis from my 6th grade science for reading my note out loud to the class in a voice I still hear. This is to Michael K. and Lacey and Nicholas for paying for their order at my drive-through window that time with a squirrel scraped up from the street. This is especially to Lacey for looking at me like she regretted that these kind of things had to happen. This is to my dad too, of course. I really thought you were dead that one morning. And this is to Coach Baker for throwing the ball just far enough that I had to cradle my arms out over the track that time. This is to Wayne and Wayne for showing me that place behind the gym between the air conditioner and the fence with all the newspapers blown up against it. It was perfect. This is to Tammy Carlton for having to look away when I walked into senior prom. This is to her friends all suddenly applying lipstick, their mouth definitely not laughing. This is to the band that night for only playing slow songs. This is to the radio all these years later for reminding me about those songs when I least expect it. This is to Wayne and Wayne for slipping me a beer through the drive-through window once. This is to Albert, my assistant manager, for pretending not to see. This is to Albert for having been 17 once as well, I guess. This is to my stepmom for threading my greasy bangs behind my ear in 5th grade, studying me, telling me I didn't really look like my dad at all, did I? This is to Officer B for understanding once, just letting me come home instead. This is to the swings that used to be down by the Western Auto, left over from some drive-in I'd never seen. This is to Deborah G for sitting with me on them that time, talking about everybody she hated, everything she was going to do someday, how it was all going to be different. This is to those guys I never knew from Permian, too. I probably had it coming. This is to my older brother, Hector, for telling them that. This is to Michael K. for telling me Hector had said that. This is to my dad for taking me by the chin, looking at each side of my face and nodding, not saying anything. This is to Albert for asking who they were, then taking his apron off, stepping out onto the patio for a cigarette. This is to Nicholas for joining the Army 2 months later, 2 months after Lacey turned up pregnant. This is to Mr. Reese for pairing me up with her for lab because she couldn't touch any chemicals. This is to Michael K. for calling out to us that there wasn't room for us both at the table. This is to Tammy Carlton for shrieking when I ran to the back of the room that day for Michael K. This is to my stepmom again for picking me up from the principal's office for fighting and delivering me to my dad's work. This is to my dad for asking me if I got any good licks in this time if I just laid there. This is to the spiral notebook I used to carry that everybody was dead in. This is to Miss Glennis for intercepting the note I'd been sitting across to Wayne in 6th grade before I really knew him, asking if I could listen to his Queen cassette at lunch. This is to my locker for hiding my face all those times between classes. And this is to Tammy Carlton, still, for planting that gum on the monkey bars that strung down into my hair, my shirt. So I had to wear something from the Lost and Found. So the teacher had to use scissors on the gum. And this is to my real mom for not flashing down from the sky that day, her spike heels deep in the back of that teacher, her hand smoothing my hair down like shit happened. And this is to my dad for keeping those high-heeled shoes in the first place, making his new wife wear them, never letting me tell, so that all the words and lies built up had to come out somewhere, someday. Now turn the page, start the story. You know that Queen thing too, I remember in 8th grade, I was living in Woodbury, right outside Austin, and you always went behind the gym if you wanted to smoke cigarettes or something or do anything illicit, you know, because the teachers couldn't see you. And one guy told me in the 4th period before lunch, he said, meet me behind the gym. And I was like, all right. And so I went and met him behind the gym. And And he looked all around to make sure nobody was watching us, and he reached way down in the front of his pants and came up with a Queen cassette, you know? And it was Queen's greatest hits, and he like hid it and handed it to me. And he said, here, listen to this, it's the best thing ever, but don't let anybody know you got it or they'll beat you up, you know? And it made it so good that, I love it. I mean, it's been a long time since I've heard music that was illicit, that felt illicit, you know? It was really nice. It really increased the, I don't know, the sound, the feel, the wonder, I guess. Doing all right on time, a little bit. Yeah, I think I'm doing all right. I will skip a story though. I want to be sure I have enough time. I'll read you a list story. I have a lot of list stories. Someday I might do a list novel. List stories like bullet points, like 1, 2, 3, 4. I think the reason I do those is it's because transitions are hard, you know. But when you have numbers, then you don't have to do a transition. Just the 2 comes next, and it's a 3. The first one of these I wrote for 5 Truck Magazine a few years. That's probably been 8 or 10 years actually. And I was looking through their submission guidelines and just the usual stuff, you know, like know this, know that. But one of the things they didn't want was flashcard fiction. And I remember I stopped and I thought, what in the world would flashcard fiction be? And so I don't think I knew about search then. I wasn't very tech literate. But I imagined what flashcard fiction would be, and that was fiction that was in blocks that would each fit on an index card that you could just like flip through. And so I sat down and wrote a story like that. And because I'd written it against them anyways, I mailed it to them so they could hate it, you know? And they accepted it. And I've written a few of them. I don't need glasses for this, because when I print stuff up myself, I print it up at like 14-point font. It's really nice, so it's not as long as it looks either. How to know you're a killer. Number 1, you're a killer because you say goodbye, Tiffany, to the college girl passing your butter and white bread across the scanner at the grocery store, even though her name tag is scarred and beaten, and only visible in flashes under the windbreaker she's got on because the register is right by the front door, and the front door is always hissing open, sometimes even when nobody's there. 2, you're a killer because you let the mouse go that shows up on your glue trap under the sink, and you stand there and watch it to see what it's going to do now in the alley, where it's going to go, and how, since its 4 feet are now 4 tufts of gray on the glue trap you've stuck to the side of the scarred and beaten dumpster. Mouse bones are like wet toothpicks, just scissors. 3, you're a killer because you think about your brother at odd moments, about the way his name tasted in the air when your mother would call it, like it stood for both of you, like you would of course follow wherever he went, like you liked eating mashed potatoes and casserole as much as he did, but you couldn't. In those scarred and beaten dishes, you only ever saw all the 100 other casseroles that had lived there and died there. 4, you're a killer because you know to never look away when an off-duty police officer locks eyes with you at a stop sign, his instincts ringing all his bells. And nobody even had to tell you not to look away. You just know this from your own instincts. You know that his scarred and beaten soul, that it's calling across to yours, that it's the same kind of lonely and afraid. Just pull forward when it's your turn. Keep moving. Number 5, you know you're a killer because you can never remember the plots of the movies you sit through at the second farthest theater from your apartment. But you can list the color and pattern of every shirt the 2 leads wore, because that's where the real story was. It was in those selections. It was like standing before a closet for you, standing there and parting the shirts, looking behind them to the wardrobe designer, the one you waited until the end of the credits to find. A name you say later in your bedroom in secret, like a promise. 6, you're a killer because you know the truth about Batman, about why he works at night, and why the mask, the gear, all the complicated exit strategies, and why he never uses guns. They attract too much attention. And most of all, why he's always watching, and why his mouth when he's watching is so important, and why he needs a cave like that, and why this scarred and battered city is his and his alone. 7, another way you know you're a killer through and through is that you can't stop with the lists. They're everywhere, and they're all so necessary, they're all so perfect, so elegant, so right. They each take so many drafts to get them that right. But the main way you know you're a killer is that you're not on a single one of these lists. 8, the 8th way you know you are what you are is that when your brother dared you to eat that Christmas light bulb in 5th grade that you did. Not little by little like you meant, but all at once, like a glass chili pepper from the cafeteria. And then he had to pay you like he said. Only that night you crept across to his bed, your mouth still bloody, and you slid that scarred and battered $5 bill under his pillow and never asked him if he found it. 9. You know you're a killer because of the way you can feel the whole city watching you push your shopping cart past the scarred and battered meat cooler at the grocery store. Your eyes and mind in private's not catching on the slash of white rib bone coming up through the red meat. You're not looking at all. You're just walking past. Your legs working just like everybody else's, just like normal. You know all this, can feel your true self writhing around in your... Number 10. You know all this, can feel your true self writhing around in your chest, but a list doesn't prove anything, does it? No, what proves it, finally, is that you sit in the back seat of a scarred and battered car for hours now. A name on your lips to say when her shift's over, and she's behind the wheel. Melissa, not Tiffany. It's so she'll think this is all a mistake. So she'll think this doesn't have to be happening. But it does. It already is. The look in her eyes in the rear view is going to be perfect. Hopefully there aren't any Tiffany's out there. I didn't think about that. I'll read a piece from here. I'll read this also. You know, I write a lot of things that are this length, like really short, or I have a lot of things that are published that length. And the reason for that, it's not that I think it's the best art form. I think it's a fun art form, definitely. I don't know what the best art form is, but the reason that a lot of them are that size is because that's about the size of a Bounty Selecta size paper towel. You know, and so when you get kids, you always get paper towels everywhere. And like you're holding the kid in this arm and trying to write a story with this hand, and you run out of room, you get to the corner and you're like, well, I'm at the end. This is Truth as a Bearded Lady. My husband has 2 hearts. He told me. When he was a kid, sideshow people were always lurking around to kidnap him into the carnival. But he got away each time, just barely. If he hadn't, we wouldn't be together right now. But he only tells me about his second heart. His other wife thinks he's like everybody else. She thinks he just has one heart, can just love one woman. I know the truth, though. He trusts me with all his secrets. If either of his hearts is bigger, then it's the one he's given me. Oh, that was my bookmark, too. All right, here it is. This is a zombie story. I was going to read either a STD story or a zombie story, but really, there's not much difference, you know what I mean? After this one, I'll take any questions, or any of y'all who need to split can split. The age, I need my glasses for this one. The age of hasty retreats. These were the days when, if you wanted to survive, you wore a leather or canvas belt with loops spaced evenly all around it. Loops made from shoestrings. You can find the shoestrings everywhere. Every husk of a person lying in the streets, all of them who hadn't been caught in the shower or doing yoga, they had some kind of footwear on them. And of course you target the men because they have laces more often. You don't so much want the work boot kind of lace, though. They're unforgiving, can get you killed. No, what you need are the kind that will break away with a flick of your wrist. And if you're not sure, then it never hurts to go ahead and cut that loop maybe halfway through just to be sure. If it snaps too early while you're scrambling over a burnt car, diving through a window, and so be it. Like I said, there are shoes everywhere. As for the belt itself, you need something wide. A general rule of thumb is that if it fits through the loops of your pants, then it's not sturdy enough. The kind of belt you want that works best is the kind that's made not to go through the loops. Police officers are the best bet, but lose the mace, the pepper spray. You really think the undead care about their eyes? However, since the majority of the police force went down in the first day or two protecting and serving, you might want to check behind the seats or in the toolboxes of the pickup trucks parked around construction sites. Tool belts. They're supple, always already broken in. Just cut or chew the pouches off, adjust the buckle so the belt rides on your hips like a real gunslinger, and you're ready. Or as soon as you poke holes for the loops of shoestrings, then all that's left is to raid the pantries, crack open the cat food. It works for all the little animals except squirrels, but who would want a squirrel? No, domestics are the best by far. With a single can of cat food, you can often draw in a full load, completely recharge your belt. The zombies can't catch them, the dogs, the cats, so they're everywhere, hiding, starving, just wanting some companionship, which you can, of course, provide. And sure, let them eat if you want. It'll make them trust you, maybe even enough that you can pick them up. As for size, under 10 pounds is best, 6 is about ideal. Next is the hard part, working those small bodies into the loops you fashion onto your belt. And never by the neck. What use would it be to carry around a cat or lapdog you've strangled? That'd be sick. And anyway, zombies don't like dead flesh. Looping them under the armpits is best. Granted, it leaves their hind legs free to pedal a furrow into your leg or buttocks, but there are ways around that. You can tie their feet together, of course, or just break them, whatever you're comfortable with. However, if there's blood from that break, then you've spoiled the cat, that puppy. And iguanas are useless, might as well be dead as far as zombies are concerned. Start over and do it right this time. Your life depends on it. And yes, hopefully you won't need to use these grenades you're making. But of course, in a more ideal world, the dead wouldn't be walking either, right? So, with a full squirming belt, then just go about living in your usual manner. Whenever it happens, and it will, that you're making your mad dash away from whatever horde you've stumbled onto, and they're gaining like they always do, then all you have to do is, without breaking stride, pull on the cat or puppy by whatever your dominant hand is and splash it down onto the ground. The idea is that you want some of that blood in the air. And if you've broken this pet's legs, then of course the lead zombie, if there's always a runner, will be on it in a flash. It's all buried in the gore. And if you tie them together, then it's pretty much the same result. And yes, some survivors have rigged complicated loops that both break away and untie the pet's legs at the same time, thus giving the zombies a moving, though gratefully injured distraction. But these knots, all that string, do you really want to trust your escape to whether or not you went under or over before you pulled tight? What you need, of course, is a dog or a cat that can't run, which, yes, starvation will to some degree satisfy, but most of us carry odd bits of food for the animals. Because we care about them? I don't think that's completely it, no. It's not a thank you in advance either, not really. It's more that the animals have conditioned us to feed them, or by feeding them just enough to keep them alive, we're demonstrating that we still have some tether, no matter how bloody, to the old world, to the way it was. And it would be completely dishonest of me to try to say that all of us don't hitch the belts around such that our favorite animal is at our dominant hand, the hand we most like to pet with. That connection with a palm-sized skull, a warm body, one dependent upon you, one happy that you're touching it, it can get you through a whole night of hiding behind a mailbox if you needed to. Though, of course, most in that situation will break, will start lobbing pets into the street like mortars, perhaps kissing each on the mouth before slinging it up into the sky. And then others, of course, after expending half their belt, will slide to their knees on the asphalt, unbuckle, and release their dogs and cats, trying to shoot them away before the horde overwhelms them. If you want to live, however, then you'll empty belt after belt behind you. There's even legend of a tall man, our progenitor perhaps, who wears bandoliers across his chest, a suckling kitten thumbed into each cartridge space, a bottle of milk in his pocket to keep them alive. And yes, with cats at least, you can sling them by the tail before release if you want. The sound they make is perfect. But you have to time it just right so the cat sails over the horde's heads. And you also have to never reconsider, never stop swinging, because that's a cat you'll never reholster. As for the animals, is this not why we domesticated them? For companionship in times of leisure, sure, but in times like this, to serve us, to help us survive. They die fully aware of what their sacrifice means, are proud to be allowing us another few feet of life. However, there are, of course, lines. The second day of the plague, when it spilled down from the airport, infected downtown, my neighbor's 9-year-old son attempted to mask his scent with the gore of a decapitated zombie. A fully effective measure, provided you have the nerve, the stomach. He had both. But you don't want to let that gore come into contact with your tear ducts or any cuts you might have. Things progressed in a predictable way after that, until my neighbor took the easy way out, siphoned the gas from his car, lawnmower, and weed eater, and set fire to himself and his son. Valiant, perhaps, but irresponsible as well. He didn't take into account the acetylene torch in his garage. When the flames spread there, as flames will, the resulting explosion caved in the wall of my son's bedroom, crushing his right leg while he slept. Luckily, it's a closed break, no bone coming through the skin, but of course, pushing him around in a wheelchair or shopping cart, even strapped to a dolly or pulled in a make-do rickshaw, that's no way to beat a hasty retreat. And this is the age of hasty retreats. Luckily for me, though, he's small for his age, 6, so I've been able to fashion a quiver of sorts for him to ride in. He sits backwards, of course, to better see and warn me about our constant pursuers, and all in all, it's not bad. I always know where he is. And as for him, he's named the animals I'll wear around my belt. There's Axel and Win and Lobby and General Tough and Red Eye, and after his mother, Sydney. And so we scavenge, have the various skirmishes that are unavoidable, until it comes to pass that running ahead of some 12 or 15 zombies one afternoon, I have to wrench the belt around, jerk sideways on Sydney, and my son reaching me for the whole time, like he wants us to die here. I lob her behind us, which is, I suppose, where my son's rear view is perhaps not as ideal as it usually is. He has to watch the lead zombie lower its mouth to the cat he named and suckle it dry, but there's nothing for it. My legs are burning, my feet pounding, my front backpack lined with canned goods. And the sounds of our pursuers are more distant now. My son's slacking his quiver like I've taught him so as to preserve my balance. At least until a chance zombie, one of the fast ones, breaks from whatever it had been feeding on in a doorway. And of course Sydney was our last animal. Now it's a race, the kind where I'm trying to be sure I really have saved one round in my left-hand pistol. The way I picture it is I'll find a corner, round it, slide to a stop, swing my son around and pull his forehead to mine, hold us together like that. If I do it right, if the slug's got enough powder behind it, I can end us both with one shot. And if not, he'll be first anyway, and I'll be covering him, and we'll have done everything we can do. Except I'm wrong. There is one more thing to do, as it turns out. One last line to cross. While I'm looking for our corner, my son pulls his release strap, launches himself down, his bad leg crunching under him, and with his weight gone, I fall forward, skid on my palms, roll over just in time to see the new lead zombie almost to him. No, I yell, reach with my left hand with the pistol. But my shot goes wild, and my son, he looks back to me then, and is so calm, so serene, so happy to be doing this for me, that it would be a travesty for me not to stand, run, keep living, for him, always for him.